Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Readings from Oconomowaukee virtual event with Books and Company and Boswell. I'm Daniel Goldin from Boswell. It is day 5,433 of us being in business. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Lisa Baudoin from Books and Company, who will introduce today's event. Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I can't do the math for our business, so it's too much. Stephen McCauley is the author of 8 novels, including the national best-selling My Ex-Life, and which I always want to say My Ex-Wife, My Ex-Life, and The Object of My Affection. His newest book, You Only Call When You're in Trouble, was an Indie Next pick for January. Maureen Corrigan from NPR rightly says this book offers readers not only the expansive gift of laughter, but also a more expansive image of what family can be. The New York Times Book Review dubbed Stephen McCauley the secret love child, and I love this quote, the secret love child of Edith Wharton and Woody Allen, and I hope you do agree on that, which I think is kind of pitch perfect. And I'm curious, too, how you won the French Ministry of Culture's Chevalier in Order of the Arts and Letters, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Yeah, Stephen is currently the co-director of the creative writing program at Brandeis University. Welcome, and we're excited to have you.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be talking to you. And Daniel, since you mentioned the number of days your bookstore has been open, I heard the other day from Eleanor Lipman, and I know that you're mutual fans of each other, but she said that she, Anita Shreve, and Mimi Medwed cut the ribbon at your store. I did not know.
They did. I might be able to share a photo later. They were our grand opening, and I know how close you were to both, actually, to all three of them, but particularly Mamie. And it was just such a glorious occasion. They had both been to the stores that I worked at Boswell before that separately. And that was kind of a dream. I'm so excited. It's still 15 years later.
And I wrote back to Ellie and I said, yeah, and Daniel is always telling me that I should end my novels more with a more happy ending, like Eleanor or Mimi did, which is true. I mean, it's true that you said that.
It is, but I've given up on that. So
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, do you want to tell us? Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book? We can start there.
Sure. I guess you'd call like the tagline or something for this novel, which I wrote is, is it ever all right to stop caring for other people in your life and begin to live for yourself? And I began writing this novel after having lunch with a friend of mine who told me about her admirable commitment to taking care of one of her siblings. And the sibling in question is someone I happen to know, and was an extremely intelligent, capable, creative person. And I wondered, why would you have to take care of such a person? And then I kind of remembered that this is someone who is not necessarily great about taking advice from other people. And that just kind of put me in mind of a lot of people I know who are in that position. And when you get to be my age, suddenly the chickens come home to roost. And so I developed this little family structure of Tom, who is the main character of the novel. It's sort of split 3 ways, but he's the main character, and he's about, he's approaching his mid-60s, as I am, although I like to say we're approaching it from different directions. And he has really spent his entire life taking care of his younger sister and bailing her out financially and emotionally and all kinds of other ways. And most specifically, when it comes to his niece, who's pretty much the real love of his life. She's 34 years old. And the novel begins when he has made a decision to stop taking care of them and to begin pursuing his own opportunities to build this kind of what he sees as his legacy project as an architect. And of course, that's when the phone rings with more people in trouble who need his help. And, will he answer the call? Of course.
And you do such a lovely job with that question and realizing that it's not really a clear-cut thing that you can solve. You can't just go cold turkey, because we always take care of each other.
Right. And yeah, I mean, the original title of the novel was The Responsible Party, which applies to everybody in one way or another in the novel. But my editor, I turned in the final draft of the book, and she said, sent me an email, said big problem, was the subject line. And I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to rewrite this thing again. But it was only that she didn't like the title, because she said that just doesn't sound like a fun read. Like, people don't want to read about responsible people, or, which is kind of true. It's like you can get away with reading about rich people or successful people, or only if they have some, like a bad marriage or a drug problem, or, something like that. So we kind of mutually came up with this title, You Only Call When You're in Trouble, which is a little bit of the same idea in a way, but aimed in a different direction. And I kind of wanted to make a case in this novel, even though I never write with a message, for people, the virtues of taking care of other people in your life, even when it comes at great cost and, involves sacrifice.
I find that really interesting, just because they're all taking care of each other, but there's a lot of, I was talking to Lisa about this, there's a lot of power dynamics in play. Like, there's like, some of it is very virtuous, sort of virtuous, but a lot of it is sort of like structural power between clients and, the architect, structural power between the teacher and the student, and the using what did we say? Like, there's some knowledge power, there's prestige that people hold over other people, there's certainly money, the law. Did that go hand in hand with your idea of taking care of people, or was that did you know that you were kind of looking at these various relationships we're writing, or did you just finish and go, look at that?
I didn't finish and go look at that, because I never reread my own stuff. But no, I mean, I obviously reread the drafts, but
It's like, I hope you edited it.
I did. Many times. As you know, I write very slowly. So, but yeah, no, I mean, what's more interesting than power dynamics in any kind of relationship, whether it's family relationships or love relationships, or, as you indicate, there's a central problem in this novel, which is that Cecily, who's 34 years old and a young professor at a college in the Midwest, is under investigation for Title IX complaint against her by another student, and that's by a student. And, that's a big kind of disruptive power situation in the novel that I found really interesting to explore, because I really like Cecily and as a character, but she's not guilty of what she's accused of. But she makes a lot of mistakes, and I really wanted to explore those mistakes that she makes.
Before I pass to Lisa, I did want to follow up with that. This is like the third novel I've read in the last few years that was dealing with this changing teacher-student dynamic and teachers getting into trouble. Whereas, if I read a book 40 years ago, they were just sleeping with the students. But if, there's a lot, it feels like it's on the minds of a lot of people in education. Just that it's so easy to get tripped up in these sort of things. I just want you to know that whatever you were thinking about seems to be on the minds of other people as well.
Because I just started listening to the Knicks because I needed to finish reading it. So, and it was the same power dynamic, not the same, but there was a power dynamic between a student and a professor. But you're just so clearly on the professor's side, like she was so manipulative. And it was interesting to see how it then gets played out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wasn't really that much on the teacher's side. I mean, I feel that what she's being accused of again is, is not, it's not what she has not behaved inappropriately in the sexual terms, which is what this female student has accused her of. But she has been somewhat unprofessional in the way she has not drawn strict lines between, what is a friendship and so on and so forth. And largely that's because Cecily, the young professor, is just so flattered by the attention of this student, and she allows her to come to office hours all the time when she probably shouldn't have, that she doesn't report something that happened that, she should have, and so on. And it's sort of based on a little bit on the fact that once, many years ago, I received a call on a Friday night, like at 11 o'clock at night, on my cell phone from an unfamiliar phone number. And ordinarily I would let that go to voicemail, but for some reason I didn't. And it was a student who was calling me and said, I'm having trouble sleeping. Would you tell me a story? And I said no, but there were some stories in the syllabus and so on and so forth. And I didn't ascribe any bad motives to that student whatsoever. They were a lovely person and so on, but it was disconcerting. And so I called my chair the next day and I said, I just want you to know that this happened. And before I finished my story, he said, "Why does your student have your cell phone number?" And I said, "Well, I've been teaching for 35 years and I always give my phone number to my students." And he said, "Well, that's got to stop." And it did very quickly. But it was interesting to me that, I thought I was telling one story about something that someone else had done, and the interpretation was, no, this is actually your problem because you gave out your cell phone number.
Wow.
And I appreciated hearing that. And it was useful information to me. So yeah.
Yeah. And I
And
think, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that, I think to your point, Daniel, about this coming up, both of your points, coming up a lot more in fiction, like a lot of writers teach and are and they're in academia, and a lot of these things have become much more closely watched and, carefully articulated. And, in my case, I've always felt a very strongly, that there's a line between personal and professional relationships, whether they're doctor-student, doctor-teacher, patient, or student-teacher, whatever it is, it's always best for everyone involved. But that has become more complicated in academia of late.
Well, I love that you say that, because at the same time, you've got Tom, the architect, who's trying to get a commission to save his job from what we perceive as a close friend. And, talk about blurring the lines there. It's a very complicated relationship. So you're saying in real life, but not necessarily in the writing life, blurry is better, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's more interesting if you're blurring the page, but I don't need that kind of trouble in real life.
I was listening to Lisa as little obsessiveness about all your books and things like that. And first of all, I want to say I don't want such happy endings now as I get older, partly because I'm more of a realist, and partly because I'm more interested in the growth of the character themselves and not necessarily how things look in terms of their lives. I also know that after the end of the book, it could be more sad. But the other thing is with the growth in romance, in bookstores, really just taking over romance and romantasy. There's so many happy endings that, a little nuance is sort of a delightful reprieve for me. I was telling Lisa, like in all your books, what I did is I mapped out all the jobs that your main male protagonist, the gay man in the center of the story has. It goes kindergarten teacher, travel agent, adult education teacher, celebrity biographer, real estate agent, HR department flunky, college prep coach, architect. I would say that your newest book, he has probably the most prestigious job of any of them, but he doesn't design houses, he designs tiny houses. So not in a big way, just a little way.
Right.
How do you come up with the jobs? I think you were a travel agent, if I remember.
Yeah, and I taught kindergarten, and
These are all your jobs.
they're all my jobs. They're all my jobs. I mean, I'm really interested in people's work lives. I mean, honestly, and I feel like it's not given enough play in fiction in some ways because, it takes up a lot of a person's life. And I certainly don't want to write about writing because that's too solitary a position.
And
So
enough people are doing that. So
are they? Okay, good.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I talked to a bunch of architects when I was researching this book. And the question of prestige is an interesting one. I mean, I think that what I heard from a number of people is that there's a perception that this is a prestigious job, but it's not unless you're at the very top rungs of the profession. It's not a particularly, great paying job. And there's a line in the book about, anyone who's held a pencil or lived under a roof thinks they can design their own house. And I heard that from a number of architects in a, somewhat humorous, but also heartfelt way. So I guess it depends how you feel about it. So, yeah.
It's hard because I want to take all these little pieces and start sort of analyze or just pointing out the connections between the whole story. Like, it makes sense that Cicely didn't have lines drawn because lines were never drawn for her. And, and it makes sense that Tom wants small spaces because he never felt like he could occupy a bigger space. So you've done these overlaps throughout the entire book that I don't know if we would call them they're not really Easter eggs.
No, I had another
Daniel.
Easter egg question. What kind of cross references? You jumped to my Easter egg question. I'll ask that later. But no, but I love the way the themes sort of play, the theme of the building and the construction and the structure kind of plays out in so many different ways in the book too.
Yeah, I realize that, especially in what I'm writing now, but just in all of my books, they often begin with a specific place. Or kind of, by which I mean building, like some kind of architectural element or something. And I think that's because I'm a Cancer, and like the idea of home is very important to me on some level. And also I love architecture, and I love, and I loved thinking about tiny houses, which is because I really love being in small spaces. I'm renting an Airbnb right now, and I have this vast kind of Harry Potter looking hall behind me. But that was the only place I could find. Usually I like to rent very small spaces. And I'm most comfortable in them. And I live with someone who is claustrophobic. And so I thought, oh, this is great. I'll be able to write about tiny houses and indulge in watching endless videos and researching tiny spaces and so on as much as I want. But then I discovered, of course, that it really fit with the personality of the character that I had in mind anyway. So.
Yeah, that one of the first things I wrote on the top of my page was just the sense of being at home the way houses were, being at home in a house, being at home in your body, being at home in a particular space, being at home in a relationship. You sort of explore all of that in such a way that's very visceral to the story. Like you can feel how we move through each relationship that expands or contracts with the way you're writing about the architecture. So
Yeah. And I guess like probably, the truth is I've never felt entirely at home anywhere. And with my family, in society, in my body, anything. And so in certain ways, I think I'm trying to find that through the writing. Good luck. But anyway.
Yeah, has that been successfully completed and you can move on to the next existential issue?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There are plenty of them out there these days. So
Well, what my complaint about, because I was quite obsessed with all the tiny home craze, is that I got very frustrated because they were not tiny homes, they were trailers. And I don't really think of a trailer as being a house. So there, that was my anger. It's like, don't put wheels on it. So I wanted little, that we just had actually a story today that they're building like 300 square foot homes for veterans in Milwaukee, and they look like houses and they don't have wheels on them. So I was very enthusiastic.
thanks for your service. 300 square feet. That's it. Huh?
That's little. Well, tiny home is supposed to be under 500.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
officially, if you get the quote marks.
Yeah. Yeah. And on wheels in many cases.
Ugh,
he considers that a trailer.
Apparently, one of the people in this conversation is okay with wheels on a tiny home.
My dad would design small houses all the time, just as an offshoot. She would just, and then I'd be brought in and say, hey, look at this, look at how I move this around, and we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do that, and I've only got this much. And this is just what he did as entertainment, is design small houses. And he also built the house. So, I guess I related to all of your house stuff that way.
Yeah, well, there's sort of a magical quality to seeing transformations like that
Yes.
of like furniture that doubles. It's a a footrest. No, it's a dining table. It's, and there's just more. And as people are moving into smaller and smaller spaces, especially in cities, that, there's more and more of this stuff developed. And some of it is really quite amazing and beautiful in certain ways.
I think I have a nice transition from the footrest that's also a dining table. And maybe one of the things I really like about the book is one of the things I love about the book is Fiona and her book, The Nature of Success and Successful Natures. And it plays out into what you were talking about with the power stuff in the relationships. And she's a hilarious character. And I was wondering, do you like the more outrageous, is it more fun to write the more outrageous things, or do you struggle with that? I mean, just I don't know. I just love it. I love the backstory. I love the twist at the end.
I mean, it's really fun to write characters who have big personalities, because especially if they're big, well-defined personalities, that I feel as if when I'm writing a scene with them, I always know how they're going to respond. I always know how they would, what they would say to some comment. And there's a little bit of a flatness to some of those characters sometimes, because they are always playing the same notes. But I find it's really, really fun to write those characters. And in the case of Fiona, who's kind of like a wannabe cult leader, who never quite gets. But I did write a chapter toward the end from her point of view, in which I had no business doing, because she doesn't get a point of view elsewhere in the book. And, if one of my students did that, I would criticize it and say, you can't just, but I wanted to give her a little bit of redemption and understand her a little bit better.
I loved it. I thought it
I
was
did
great.
too.
I thought that
Yeah,
was terrific.
yeah,
Go
it
back
wouldn't be
and
the
tell all
same
your
without
students
it.
it's okay.
Okay.
Yes. Forget those rules.
Yeah.
Actually, I just read a book called A Map for the Missing, or I read it early and then we just did it in book club by Belinda Weekwan Tang, I think her name is. And she did that, like it went back and forth between a few people. And at the very end, just at the very end, we got into one character. And like it, I understand as a rule, you're not supposed to do that, but I don't know.
I think it's
I
okay.
really,
I think it's
yeah.
okay if you get like a whole chapter. If suddenly, you get like a paragraph from someone's
Oh,
random
they
point of
need
view,
a,
that kind of
right,
bugs me. But
right.
um, it's I think it's quite powerful all of a sudden. I'm not talking about my book, but
Let's talk about your book.
no, in general, to see the inner workings of a character you've only been observing from the outside, and to really understand them. Because I honestly feel like the writer's job is to see behind the character's defenses, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you avoid writing just like awful. There's a mother in this book. There's several mothers in this book who aren't like wonderful, but Cecily's boyfriend's mother is causes a lot of problems, but given her situation, she faces a lot of problems in her life, and so it's I liked seeing both sides of that and kind of exploring her humanity a little bit more.
I was very impressed how Cecily, like you didn't have to go in Nita's head because Cecily, despite the fact that she was very upset by the interaction, seemed to understand what was going on. She was a smart person, that Cecily, I gotta
Yeah,
say.
Yeah.
she can't necessarily save herself, but you know,
Yeah.
she is very
Yeah.
because as Lisa said, she's kind of grown up in a situation where she had to evaluate every relationship and interpret every conversation, and so she's become quite adept at reading other people for her own, well-being.
When she talks about you have her having so few belongings in the apartment she shares, and making sure her shoes are tucked underneath the bed, you just give a sense that she doesn't feel like she can take up much space. She has to kind of be in the corner. And you don't feel bad for her. You always root for her to get to where she's going.
Yeah. And I wanted to make it believable that Tom would be so invested in taking care of her. That he really um sees this as his not duty exactly in life, but something that he really wants to do, and has been called to do for most of his life. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was
I,
going to talk about that relationship. Do you have a question, Daniel?
no, I was going to ask about a few places. I mean, I feel like, have you ever, I apologize because a good interviewer would have reread all your books, but
no, that would be like no. Even my minuscule output would be way beyond the call of duty.
well, if I was better. But I don't remember you venturing as far afield as or into the Midwest like Chicago. Do you have any other books that had a Chicago setting?
Um, I I don't think so. I mean, I think I used to spend a lot of time in the Chicago area. Um, and so I kind of feel as, and I also, so I sort of feel as if I know Chicago better than I in fact do. But I feel like I at least could know it well enough to write about it with some conviction or something.
Yeah, it was fun. I went, woo, look, close places I go. But I really liked the Woodstock stuff too. So
Yeah.
that seemed like you had a very good handle on
Yeah.
the
Um,
psychology and the people and the
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit, I guess you could say it's a little bit satirized, but my partner of many decades owned a piece of property out near Woodstock, in West Saugerties, New York, which is adjacent to Woodstock. And so I spent a lot of time out there. And it's a very particular place, and it's a very appealing place. But it attracts people like Dorothy, who's kind of searching for something desperately and, has paid way too much attention to the lyrics of every Joni Mitchell album. And you know, she believes it's like, she vacillates between thinking the lyrics had been written about her and thinking they'd been written by her. And she kind of moves to Woodstock on a whim after, listening to Ladies of the Canyon 3,000 times and thinking, this is where I belong. So, and there are a lot of people in Woodstock who, I mean, still to this day, who went to the music festival, in 1969, was it? And just never left. So yeah, that creates a certain kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, some of your characters, is his name Herb?
Yes.
Yeah, he is something. And it's almost, I could smell him.
Yeah, it's probably not a great scent, but yeah, there's a lot of weed in there too.
Yes.
He's been smoking a lot of weed, and there definitely is a lot of, well, I guess there is everywhere now, but
Right.
you can barely walk down the street without smelling weed. But
Not in Wisconsin.
oh,
Yeah.
really? You still?
No, it's not legal here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, come to
And you
this.
could still smell it. I mean, it's still here, but it's not omnipresent the way it is in some other places. So, but
Yeah.
it feels like in Woodstock, it's probably baked into the bricks.
Literally, in that case, it's baked in, waked in. I have anyway, yeah. I have
Yes,
a
whoa.
relationship to, I was talking about this with someone the other day, that's like, every other store in Massachusetts is cannabis store. And I stopped, like smoking weed or doing edibles or anything many, many years ago, just because I figure like I'm losing my brain cells rapidly enough as it is. I don't need to, enhance the process. But I can't go into one without buying something, like buying edibles or so I have this cabinet literally filled with, microdosing M&Ms or joints or gummies and this, that, and the other thing, which I have no intention of ever using. But there's something so thrilling to me about the idea that, like, oh, you can walk into a store and legally buy, grass, which is what I would call it. But anyway.
You could have you could make little gift baskets for people when they visit you.
Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll do that.
One copy of one of your old books, like the Swedish translation of
Right.
Man of the House.
Yeah.
And some Swedish fish.
Edible.
And sweet. And then
Edible.
Infused.
Then you can read it and think that you understand what's being said. So yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely a changing culture. I'm from New Mexico and it's legal there. And yeah, let's just say it's changed a lot in my family.
Okay. For the better, I hope.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I should note, I forgot, it's been every so often Zoom changes the structures of stuff. And it used to be the default was the chat was on, and now the default is always the chat is off. Or at least it is from us. So I did turn it on, so feel free to say anything. You can ask questions in the Q&A or just say, get off the stage, you goons. Well, don't say that, we'll cry. Lisa, do you have another question? We got one. Looks like it's from Stephanie. Covington.
Stephanie Covington. Stephanie Covington. I can't believe you're on here, Stephanie. Stephanie lives in LA. And she is a fabulous writer and an incredibly gorgeous person in every respect. And I met her at a writer's colony in Vermont 30 some years ago, at the same time that I met my partner. And so she is a very dear person, and I'm so flattered you're on here, Stephanie.
This is why these virtual events are great.
Yeah, you're right.
They really are.
Okay.
Lisa, the next question is yours.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to go back to Tom and Cicely in that sense that and Alan, Tom's partner, who decided that his attention for Cicely was too much. And I just question, if Cicely was Tom's daughter, would it have been the same way? And why can't we fall in love in that way that's paternal like that, or maternal or familial, when it's not?
Yeah, I mean,
That's so complicated.
it is complicated, and I also think that that one of the things is that, I mean, but people who are so involved in their children's lives that they can't pay attention to the lives of the other people in their life, whether it's, domestic partners or spouses, whatever it is, that can also be problematic. And I think that, Tom loses a romantic relationship in his life early on in the book because his boyfriend says, I know that I'm never going to be central to your life. You're always going to put her first, and I'm always going to come second. And whether or not that's a unfair accusation. I don't think it's an unfair accusation. Actually, I think it's probably right. And so he had to kind of go live his life. And I think the question that I wanted to look at in this book is, like, when you come toward the end of your life, as Tom is coming toward the end of his life, do you look back at that and say, oh my God, what a mistake I made. If only I had done X, Y, Z. Or do you embrace it and say, yeah, this is what I did in my life, and this is what I made sacrifices for, and this is a positive for me. So I kind of, as I said, I didn't want to make, okay, this is like my soapbox, but I feel as if we're in a moment where good citizenship is devalued. And I find that pretty sad, whether that means something as simple as like people not using their directionals when they're driving, to much bigger issues. And I guess I wanted to make a case for the value in that, and the beauty of it, really. Yeah.
Amy Popple or Popel, I'm not sure, said she loves the book and wants to know if you have a Cecily in your life.
Amy
XOXO.
Amy is a wonderful writer of, Amy, is it 4 novels now, I think? And I highly recommend her work. I know she's working her way toward the finish of her next novel. And what was the question?
Do you
Oh,
have a Cecily in your life?
No, I don't. I'm much too selfish. I would never take care of someone, to the way that Tom takes care of her. I think I was like writing about the way I would hope I would behave, but no, I probably wouldn't. So I do have people in my life that I love and take care of and care about, but I don't have that person in my life, Cecily.
You might be surprised that you don't, because you're not writing it, you might have meant more to people than you know. It feels like it already, but
I see in the
The chat is booming.
Anyway.
I'm trying to get Amy's last book in our little chat box so people can look at more at it. But it looks like the last book is The Sweet Spot. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. I have to do both stores. So Lisa, you have to do another question because I'm editing.
So in a way, this is a found family book, but I was talking about how it also feels like it's a refound family book. Like they're refinding the connections of how their own family is, like, and also finding new family members and how that all complicates. So you really do blur the lines between what we consider family and how we consider our own family. That's family.
Well, I want to
Yeah.
put in context of what Lisa's saying is she said to me beforehand, that she said if Tom and Cecily had been father and daughter instead of uncle and niece, would Alan have been more forgiving of their close relationship?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that people have more, I mean, as I said before, I think, that those, children can be problematic as well, but I think that people just have more tolerance for traditional families and in some ways more, not everyone obviously, but more respect for it. And I think that's, unfortunate. There's a line in the book somewhere where some overbearing character in the novel, that Tom observes that, politically he totally supports, equal rights for gay people and so on and so forth, but deep down inside, he just kind of can't help but believe that they don't really count as much as, the rest of the world. And I think that there's some of that about, like these kind of logical families versus biological families as well.
On another note, Margaret Reardon wants to say she's coming in. She wants to say hi from Cleveland.
Hi, Margaret. How are you, Margaret? I don't think we've ever met Margaret, but she is has been a great supporter of my work for many years, and I truly appreciate you being here, Margaret.
Cleveland's fun.
Yeah.
Maybe someday. Maybe you'll be reading at one of the Cleveland Public Library or one of the bookstores there. What's Max Backs and
Yeah.
is it Redberry? Is that the other one? I don't know.
Yep. And then there's one more and I can't remember what it's called. I was at it. It was a newer one.
Yes, there are so many wonderful new stores. All right, Helene
Yes.
would like to know when the book will be translated into French. She is watching from Montreal.
Hi, Ellen. Ellen is so great. Is another great supporter of my work, and for years actually was like helping me with Facebook, because she's very skilled in terms of computer stuff at a point in my life when I was not. But anyway, I don't know the answer to that question, Ellen. I'm working on French translation, as is allegedly the publisher. So we'll see what happens. But maybe I'll come to Montreal this summer. I haven't been back in so many years, and I really look forward to it.
Let's see. Ann Pierce says, and Whitney Pierce, enjoying the discussion. Don't tell us spoilers. All right. Fine.
Okay.
There goes the last 20 minutes of this. Trisha, watching from your hometown, Bacolo. So proud as always. And yes, and there's also she would like you to come to Montreal. That would be great. So
Okay.
We have some questions. Oh, David asked, did your publisher subject your new book to a sensitivity read, which is, much more common now. I'm not sure what would they be looking for, but it's interesting that there could be an LGBTQ sensitivity read. I know that one of my friends who's South Asian had a South Asian sensitivity read, and they made her change it. And she said, well, but that was me. But they said, yeah, well, we don't want it in there. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some South Asian characters in this book, actually. And I'm not aware of there being a sensitivity reader. I think I would know if there had been. I will say that I had the other day I got an email from someone who was reading the novel, someone I don't know, who said that who lives in Milwaukee, so who may be on this call, I'm not sure, but she pointed out that I had used the word hopefully repeatedly, and never used it correctly,
Oh no!
which is true, I'm sure. And also, what was it? There was another thing that, oh damn, what was it? Oh, I used the word jive instead of jibe.
Oh,
And she questioned the copy editor. And I said, well, the copy editor and I had a little bit of a contentious relationship. And so I think that she was like too busy pointing out, this goes back to sensitivity, sort of names, and that in her view, I hadn't used enough ethnic names and so on and so forth. I don't know. It was a little
mm,
interesting as an experiment.
no. Well, I think my guess is you probably came out fine in that if you had had one. I will say that interestingly enough, we had there are all kinds of specialty readers, and sometimes you wish there were more. We had one of my booksellers read a middle grade book written by a baseball player, supposedly, that was ghost written just to tie into another theme in the book. And we don't think that baseball tape player had read the book, nor do we didn't write it. We don't think he read it because there were all these baseball errors in it. And they're like, he needed a baseball sensitivity reader. So
I would need a baseball sensitivity reader too.
your next book is set in the world of sports.
Yeah, I know. Go.
There's something you haven't done. I have a list. So
Yeah.
maybe that's number 9.
Okay, good. That's going to require a lot of research that I look forward to doing.
Well,
The question was
you can
from
do the novelization of Take Me Out or something.
Yeah, that question was from David Schmerler. David, I know from ICM from many, many years ago, and is a wonderful person, and so lovely to see you, David. Not that I do see you, but to see your name on screen. Thank you for all that you have done for me over these many years.
The publishing scenes were great with the publisher and the whole ghostwriting power play and underline of how we rewrite stories or retell stories and change stories was very interesting. Was that something you thought about as you started it, or did it just come about as you were putting it together?
It came about as I was putting it together, the realization that Fiona was not necessarily who she claims to be, in terms of a writer. And for many years, not for many years, well, my partner, Sebastian Stewart, worked for many years at a ghostwriting company. And they would write business books as, well, anyway, I won't get into that, and for a while I did it as well. And it was kind of astonishing to me because we would get what was basically kind of an outline of 3 different ideas, and then write the whole book more or less. And so it's something that happens. And actually, I think that a lot of people who there are a lot of books right now being written allegedly by people who have platforms, but not necessarily much interest in writing. And an astonishing number, I think, are written by someone other than the
Yeah,
name.
I've actually met a number of ghostwriters over the years. One of my customers wrote, she's now passed away, but she wrote the Beardstown Ladies Common Sense Investment Guide, which was a huge bestseller that eventually, and not only that, but it wasn't her fault that the numbers were booked a little, but Lisa's come across folks as well, and we've hosted authors who definitely not read. And the thing that's so amazing is sometimes these people are even known as writers, like they're screenwriters, and they didn't write the book.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of, like, I recently got an email from someone saying that someone who I thought was like writing all of her books and is now looking for a new ghostwriter. And I mean, and that was her thing, was that she was a writer, and was interviewing new people to write her books. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. I mean, honestly, if I could afford that, I would love to have somebody write my and I would be way more prolific than I am already. I always thought, like, some of my early books especially did really well in France, and I always thought it was because the translator was just like a way better writer than I am, and that she was like improving these books as they went along. And so as she was translating them, and at one point I thought, like, why don't you write the first draft and I'll just like translate it back into English, and we can work that way. I think it might be more successful.
Well, it seems like there are a lot of writers on this call, so maybe one of them will take up your call because they're like, I don't have enough to write. I'd like to also write your books. And I do know you wrote the two. I never read them. I'm thinking they were, by the time you told me about them, they were gone. But one day I'm going to read the yoga books too.
They're
So.
never gone, Daniel.
Well, there are. I mean, they're second. Yeah, I can buy them secondhand. I'm a bookseller. I like to buy it through the traditional.
Okay. Those are my 9th and 10th books. Even though
So
they're not published under
now
my...
now I have to look up all the books I have to figure out. Now, didn't Sebastian wrote a business book under his name too, right? One of them. Didn't he have like from Crown? Wasn't there something like early before because I read the novel and then there's the memoir.
Yeah.
I thought there was something. Oh no, it was a thriller. It was a thriller. Sorry.
Yeah. It was a thriller. It was called The Mentor. It's a really good book. But anyway, yes. Yeah. No, but that was definitely not a business book. That was a novel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think of Crown as being a business publisher. We've got a couple more questions. Linda said, I don't actually know you, so I want to say hi anyway. And thank you. And Jennifer would like to just a little writing process. She'd like the standard writing process question. What's your anything quirky about how you write? The Panther plotter thing. I can't imagine. I just don't believe that you have this mapped out, but if you do, then you'll be a big surprise to me.
Based on the mess that you experienced reading this book, you can't possibly imagine that I had it mapped out. I, in fact, did not have it mapped out, Daniel. No, I mean, like for the last couple of books I've worked on, I've used a kind of a different process than I've used before, which is just to let myself write whatever I want to write on any given day. And I kind of have a list of scenes that I can think in my mind that are going to occur between characters, and I write them out of sequence. And for this novel, for example, You Only Call When You're in Trouble, I had notebooks filled with scenes and characters that never got used. And even plot lines, if you can imagine, there'd be more plot lines. The metaphor that I use is like shooting a documentary film, where you have hours and hours of footage, and a lot of it just ends up on the cutting room floor. And it's not a highly efficient process, but I like to think anyway, by the end of it, I really know these characters very well. And it's also, for me, it just kind of gets me past that feeling like, I don't know what the next scene should be, or I don't know what the next chapter should be. And if you just let yourself write something that's maybe not connected to the previous scene, you get somewhere at least. And getting words on the page is always a happy experience for me, even if I know.
I'm curious if I as a reader would love to, if you were Sarah J. Maas, you'd be putting some of that content to Barnes and Noble and some to the indies and some to Target. Do you ever put like the deleted scenes online or anything?
I put them right in the trash.
Oh no!
I know.
We're interested. I would have been interested.
It just makes the story the story felt very rich to me. And I think that has to go with the process of living deeply in the story and just pulling out the parts that are the essence of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's something gratifying about it, for me. My greatest pleasure in writing is writing about people. And so to kind of allow myself to say, I'm just going to write about Dorothy or Fiona today, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm just going to live in their shoes for a while and see what comes out is really fun for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes a bigger, yeah, you're right. It's a fuller, richer book that way. Yeah. Um, Last question about characters. Some of my favorite writers do this, but because I read your books like every 3 years or so, can't always remember what happened 4 books ago. Have you ever done an Easter egg? Has a character ever shown up in another book?
Yes, and I can't remember. Yeah, but I know that happened once. That there was it was a character from True Enough, and she's referenced in another book, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But I love that whole like Larry McMurtry thing where he has a character from this novel gets their own novel over here and so on and so forth. And yeah, I mean, I love that idea, but I haven't done that yet. So
I always think of there's a Barbara Pym where the characters from my faded, I have to go, it's The Glass of Blessings, which is my favorite novel. They show up at a fountain, like they're just overheard at a fountain, like 5 books later.
yeah, I love that. I love her. I love Barbara Pym.
Ah, yay. You are so lucky because you can go to the annual convention every year because it's in Cambridge.
I know. I never have. I feel like that would be intimidating.
I belong. It's very academic.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I don't know if we were gonna go, and then we started reading the journal, and we're like, "Oh, I don't know. I'll wait for this annual Stephen McCauley conference, I guess."
I think
Okay.
you need to go, and I think you need to use it fodder for a new book.
Yeah, that would be a very Barbara Pym thing to do, actually.
Yeah. Your assignment.
We have buying You Only Call When You're in Trouble, either from Books and Company or Boswell, or your favorite indie bookstore. I think we should probably, it's very sad.
We need book recommendations.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yes.
Did you come up with one?
Book recommendation. Well, you know what? I read my friends, Christopher Castellani, who's author of Leading Men, and Margot Livesey, who's author of many novels, including what the title of the new one. I'm going to screw up. It's
The Road from Belhaven.
The Road from Belhaven. Both read, they like sometimes read books together and then talk about them. And they were reading East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which I had read when I was, young and loved. And I was so envious. And so I picked it up and I reread it over winter break from teaching. And I just loved it. It is such a big potboiler of a novel. And it's so satisfying and so wacky, but I just love that. I love that book. And so I would recommend that if you haven't read it.
I bet a lot of people haven't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. I love it. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're very grateful. And the next time you talk to Lisa, she'll have read all 8 of the books because I'm gonna
Probably.
I'm gonna make her read them in Italian if you can send them to me.
Only in Italy, though.
If you've read one, you've read them all.